I've lived on Delmar Court for 11 years. I want you to picture the street before I tell you what happened on it, because the picture matters. It's a quiet residential cul-de-sac in a mid-sized city in Ohio. The kind of street where people put American flags out on the 4th of July and leave Amazon packages on each other's porches when it rains, and wait from their driveways on Saturday mornings. 11 houses, a shared mailbox cluster at the entrance, a dead oak tree at the end of the circle that the HOA has been arguing about removing for 6 years without resolution. I moved in with my then wife Karen in 2013. We bought the house because the school district was good and the commute to my job at the water treatment plant was 20 minutes flat. And the neighbors, when we met them at the open house, seemed like the kind of people you could borrow a ladder from. We were right about the ladder. We were right about most of them, until we weren't. Karen and I divorced in 2019. Amicable, or as amicable as these things get, which is to say nobody threw anything and we still text occasionally about our dog Russet, who she took, and I don't blame her for. I stayed in the house. 11 years of mortgage payments meant it felt more like mine than anywhere I'd ever lived, and I wasn't going to let a divorce take the house too. So by the time this story starts, it's 2021, I'm 43 years old, I'm living alone in a 3-bedroom house on a cul-de-sac in Ohio, and my main social life consists of weekend barbecues with my neighbor Pete, occasional beers with my friend Marcus from work, and a standing Tuesday evening phone call with my mother in Columbus. The house at the end of the court, number 14, the one closest to the dead oak, was vacant for about 8 months when the Galloways moved in, September 2021. I remember because it was still warm enough to be outside when the moving truck came, and I walked over to introduce myself the way you do. The man who came to the door was tall, heavy-set, with the kind of handshake that's trying to tell you something. He said his name was Dominic Galloway. He said his wife was Patrice. He said they had 2 sons, both grown and not living with them. He was friendly in a surface way, the way someone is friendly when they've practiced it. I said, "Welcome to the neighborhood." He said, "Thanks." I went home. The first thing I noticed, maybe 3 weeks after they moved in, was the cars. Not a lot of cars, not at first, just more than you'd expect. A few nights a week, 4 or 5 vehicles would arrive between 8 and 10 in the evening, park along the curb, and leave by midnight or 1 in the morning. Different cars each time, or mostly different, with a few repeaters. I didn't think much of it at first. People have friends. People have book clubs. People have poker nights. That was the thing, actually. I assumed it was poker. Lots of guys get together and play cards. I'd done it myself in my 30s. I filed it away as a hobby and moved on with my life. Then Pete mentioned it. Pete lives 2 houses down from me, number 8, and he's the closest thing I have to a best friend on the street. Retired electrician, early 60s, widower, grows tomatoes in his backyard with a dedication that borders on religious. He came over one Saturday in October with a 6-pack, and we sat on my porch and he nodded toward number 14 and said, "You notice anything funny about the Galloways?" I told him about the cars. He nodded and said he'd noticed the same thing, but that wasn't what he meant. What he meant was the guy he'd seen making what looked like a cash exchange in the driveway 2 nights before. Not a drug exchange, he was clear about that. Said it didn't feel like that. Said it felt more like someone paying a tab. We sat with that for a while. Over the next few weeks, I started paying more attention. Not obsessively, I wasn't parking by the window with binoculars, but I noticed things. The cars came more frequently as fall deepened. Some of the people I started recognizing. A man in his 50s who drove a silver Cadillac and always wore a jacket regardless of temperature. A younger guy, maybe late 20s, who parked down the street and walked to the house. A woman I eventually recognized as the wife of a city councilman whose face I'd seen on campaign signs. The cash exchanges Pete had described weren't isolated. I saw 2 myself. Quick handoffs in the driveway or at the side door. The kind of transaction that happens fast because both parties want it to be over quickly. By November, I was fairly confident I was watching an illegal gambling operation. Not poker between friends, something organized, something with a house cut, with regular clientele, with money moving in amounts that explained why Dominic Galloway's handshake felt like a statement. I want to be honest about the internal debate I had, because it wasn't simple. These were my neighbors. Dominic and Patrice had been perfectly civil to me every time we crossed paths. A wave here and a brief conversation about the weather there. Nobody on the street was being harassed or threatened. The operation, whatever it was quiet, contained. The cars came and went without incident. Half the street probably hadn't noticed at all. But I noticed, and the more I noticed, the more I understood that what was happening in that house wasn't harmless. Organized illegal gambling doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's connected to other things, to money laundering, to the kind of people who don't like loose ends. I'd read enough news stories to know that neighborhoods that host these operations don't stay quiet forever. And there was the councilman's wife. If an elected official was connected to this, that felt like something a citizen was supposed to do something about. I called the tip line for the city police in early December. I gave the address, a general description of what I'd observed, the dates and approximate times, a description of the Cadillac and its partial plate number. I was thorough because I'm a thorough person. I left my name and callback number. Nobody called me back. I called again in January. I spoke to an actual person this time, a desk officer who took my information again and said someone would follow up. Nobody followed up. In February, I found out through Pete, who had heard it from our neighbor Linda at number 6, who had heard it from someone, that Dominic Galloway had apparently mentioned to a few people on the street that someone had been making complaints about his house and asking if anyone knew who it was. I don't know how he knew. I don't know if someone at the precinct was connected to him, or if it was a leak, or if he was just fishing. But the fishing had gotten results, because by March, 3 separate neighbors had pieced together that I was the most likely candidate, and the temperature on Delmar Court changed overnight. Linda, who had brought me soup when Karen left, stopped making eye contact. The Petersons at number 11 declined my wave from their driveway. A guy named Brett from number 3, who I'd always found mildly insufferable but tolerable, came to my door one evening in March and told me with the energy of someone delivering a civic address that I needed to mind my own business and stop causing problem for people who hadn't done anything to me, and that the neighborhood didn't need that kind of drama. I asked him what drama specifically he was referring to. He got flustered and left. In April, someone slashed my front left tire. I can't prove it was connected. I have no evidence, but I'd had that car for 4 years and never had a tire issue, and the slash was clean, not a nail, not road damage, a clean cut. And it happened the night after I'd sent a second written complaint to the police department, this time via certified mail. Pete stood by me. His exact words delivered over coffee at my kitchen table the morning I found the tire were, "You're not wrong, Tom. You're just inconvenient." I've thought about that sentence a lot since. I went back to the certified mail route because the tip line had failed me. I wrote a detailed letter to the police department's organized crime unit, not the general tip line. I included dates, vehicle descriptions, the partial plate, and a specific mention of the individual I believed to be a city councilman's spouse. I sent the copy to the city attorney's office, and because I'd done some research by then and had started to suspect the operation might be larger than one house, there were references online to a gambling network in our county that law enforcement had been aware of for years without acting. I sent a third copy to the FBI field office in Cleveland. That was in May. In August, on a Tuesday afternoon when I was at work, 6 federal vehicles pulled onto Delmar Court. I know this because Pete called me while it was happening, breathing like he'd run a lap, and described what he was seeing in real time. Agents in vests, a warrant, Dominic Galloway being walked out his front door with his hands behind his back, Patrice sitting in the back of a car looking straight ahead. I left work early. By the time I got home, the vehicles were gone, but the street had the particular charged stillness of a place where something significant has just occurred. I sat in my parked car for a minute. Then I went inside and called my mother. The federal charges came out over the following weeks, piece by piece. Dominic Galloway was one node in a county-wide illegal sports gambling network that had been operating for almost a decade. The network had allegedly processed millions in bets, employed a tiered system of local operators, of which Galloway was one, and had connections to 2 sitting local officials, one of whom was indeed the councilman whose wife I'd recognized. The FBI had apparently been building the case for over a year. My letters, from what I eventually pieced together through a conversation with an FBI community liaison who called to thank me for the documented tip, had helped accelerate the final phase of the investigation by providing corroborated street-level observation that matched patterns they'd already identified. I don't know exactly how much my tip mattered. I don't know if they'd have gotten there without me. Probably yes, eventually. But maybe not before more money moved, more people got pulled in, more local politics got contaminated. What I do know is what happened on Delmar Court after the arrest. Linda brought me a casserole. I'm not even joking. 4 days after the federal raid, Linda from number 6 showed up to my door with a ceramic dish covered in foil and an expression on her face that was trying very hard to be normal. She said she made extra lasagna and thought I might want some. I accepted it with a straight face and said thank you. We didn't discuss anything else. She left. The lasagna was actually excellent. Brett from number 3 never came to apologize, but he started waving from his driveway again, which I suppose is the suburban equivalent. The Petersons resumed eye contact. The street gradually returned to its previous temperature. The particular warmth of people who want to pretend a difficult period simply didn't happen. I had Pete and I talk about it over beers on my porch about a month after the arrest. It was September again, almost exactly a year after the Galloways had moved in. The dead oak at the end of the circle had finally been approved for removal, and there was a stump where it had stood, raw and pale in the evening light. You know what's funny, Pete said, not like it was funny at all, is that nobody's going to say they were wrong. I said I knew. And you're not going to make them, he said. I said I wasn't. He nodded and drank his beer. Good, he said. That's how you live on a street. He was right. That's the thing about communities. They have a collective memory that edits itself, that smooths over the moments that reflect badly on the group, that allows everyone to resume normal life without the friction of accountability. I could have pushed. I could have made Brett's visit to my door into a neighborhood-wide conversation about who stood where and why. I could have brought up the tire. I didn't, because Pete was right. You can be right, or you can keep living somewhere. And sometimes you have to pick. I chose to keep living here. 11 years of mortgage payments, the 20-minute commute, the mailbox cluster at the entrance. Number 14 is vacant again. It's been that way since the arrest. There's a lockbox on the door and a listing that's been sitting on Zillow for months, probably because anyone who looks up the address finds the news articles and thinks twice. I've walked past it a few times on my evening loop around the street. It looks like any other empty house, just windows and walls, no trace of what moved through it. Last Tuesday, I had my standing phone call with my mother. She asked how the street was. I said quiet. She said that sounded nice. I said it did, and I meant it.